Well, happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a beautiful weekend. You were able to worship Jesus Sunday. And if for any reason you were not able to be in church Sunday, go to the website, fbcrockhill.org, and watch one of the live streams from our services this past Sunday. Today, we are in Genesis 45. And if you heard my devotion Friday, you know that today starts year 6 of us doing these daily devotions as part of our Bible reading plan. The very first one aired 5 years ago, March 23, 2020. And so today starts year 6 of these devotions, and this is number 1,301. I'm blown away thinking that we've recorded in that many devotions. And I'm truly, truly, truly thankful that you're a part of this ministry and that you're growing in the Lord and you love His Word. All right, Genesis 45, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and they have a reunion. And then he sends them on their way to find Jacob or Israel, bring him down to Egypt so Joseph and his dad can have a long-awaited reunion. It's a beautiful chapter. And I want to share with you a few verses that really spoke to my heart in this chapter. The first one are verses 1 and 2, where this is after, remember, Thursday in chapter 44, Judah had offered to stay as a slave so Benjamin could go back. And when he said all of that, Joseph responds in chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, his brothers, but the other Egyptian officials and servants in the room. And he cried, have everyone go out from me. And so there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Everybody left except Joseph and his brothers. And then verse 2, and he wept, he cried. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. The people in the other rooms heard him crying. And the household of Pharaoh heard of it. It made its way to the palace. And this has been building because there's a couple of other times in previous conversations where Joseph had to turn away because he was becoming emotional. And here it's just like this volcano inside him just unleashed. It just exploded. All this pent up emotion. And I would imagine some of it was stuff that had been pushed down for years. And here it just all explodes. It comes out. He weeps and he cries and they embrace. And can I say as a pastor, don't hold your grief in. Do not hold your grief in. Let it out. Because the whole time you're holding it in, it eats away at you. It does something to you, whether you know it or not, but it does. So let it out. Let it out. Another thing that spoke to me is verse 5. Joseph is speaking to his brothers after they discover who he is. He says, now, do not be grieved or angry with yourselves. Remember, in the narrative of these chapters, different times they had had conversations in their Hebrew language. Now, Joseph understood what they were saying. They didn't know he understood them, but he did. And in their conversations, they sensed that maybe the bad stuff that was happening to them in Egypt was God judging and punishing them because of what they had done to Joseph. Joseph knew they felt bad. And so he says to them, do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. Don't be upset with yourself and don't be sad. Don't be filled with grief because of what you did to me. For God, verse 5, God sent me before you to preserve life. Now, I want to focus first on the first part of that verse. Joseph gave his brothers permission, freedom, to not live in the regret and guilt of the past, to not be a prisoner, if you will, to the regret and the anger and the sorrow and the guilt of what they had done years years earlier. And in doing that, he gave them a gift of freedom, a gift of peace. Sometimes some people want to hold something over somebody forever. Forever. Never let it go. Joseph did not do that, and I am so glad God does not do that with us. There's some wisdom in that if you want to have long-lasting relationships. Another thing spoke to me is the end of verse 5, where Joseph said to his brothers, you did this, but God, notice this, God sent me before you to preserve life. God sent me here as his instrument so that I could lead the nation to prepare for this famine so that lives would be saved. Wow. Wow. Verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth to keep you alive by a great deliverance. God sent me. You all did this to me, but God is the one who sent me here to take care of you. And you had no clue when you were throwing me in that pit and selling me to the caravan. You had no clue that God was using those circumstances to keep you alive during this famine. Verse 8. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. It reminds me of Romans chapter 8, when the Bible says that all things work together for good to those who love God and are the called according to his purpose. Not that all things are good, but that God works through all things to bring about good to those who love him and are called to his purpose. God had a plan for Joseph, and Joseph knew that, and I am humbled and amazed at the way God can take the bad that people do. He doesn't cause it, he doesn't will it, but he takes the bad that people do, and sometimes God maneuvers through all of that in ways we cannot fathom to bring good and accomplish his ultimate purposes. It's an amazing thing. And I think having that kind of view of God and of life is one of the things that helps us from becoming bitter when bad things happen. One more verse that spoke to me, verse 27. Verse 27. They go back to Canaan and tell Jacob, Joseph is alive. Wow. I mean, all these years, Jacob thought his son was dead. And now he learns that he's alive, and not only is he alive, but he's a powerful man in Egypt, and he's taking care of the whole family. And in verse 27, when they told him all the words of Joseph that he had spoken to them, when the brothers said to Jacob, i.e. Israel, here's what Joseph said. And when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, Joseph had sent them back with wagons and livestock and supplies and food and clothing. I love the end of verse 27. The spirit of their father Jacob revived. Wow. The spirit of their father Jacob revived. The power of good news. The power of good news. You know, as parents, we have to be careful in our disciplining our children that they only that we not only speak to them bad news, so to speak. They need to hear us speaking good news. So does your wife. So does your husband. And you know what the best news of all is? It's the good news of the gospel of salvation in Jesus Christ. And lost people desperately need to hear us talking more about the good news of the gospel than the bad news of certain sins. The power of good news. the spirit of their father Jacob revive. Hey, let's revive some spirits this week. God bless you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.